Hey, welcome to our little show. Here's the way it works. I riff on stuff and you react. The phone numbers, you'll need them. Use them. 512-834-1027. It's 512-834-1027. Call or text. You know, if you text, you get a smiley face emoji back from me instantly. You know how that works, right? If you want to follow me on Twitter or X or whatever it's called this particular week, I'm at Jeff Ward Show. You can post comments there. All I ask is that you get to the point. Please don't suck. Try to make the show better. That's at Jeff Ward Show. Make sure you check out and subscribe to the podcast. We drop a podcast. Yes, we're dropping podcasts again. It took a few days after we got hacked for the crypto and nude photos. But we're dropping the podcast each afternoon. Subscribe to it. Check it out. You can get the Jeff Ward Show podcast wherever you download podcasts. And unfortunately for me and my face that looks like Shrek, the videos on YouTube are up and going again as of, 4 minutes ago. So subscribe to the Jeff Ward Show YouTube channel. We drop that each afternoon as well. I'm going to tell you how and why the Texas-Oklahoma game in Dallas this weekend is incredibly important, more so than usual. How it's important for each program, and what's odd, at least I think my take about this is going to be different, but hear me out, why it's important in very different ways, very different reasons for each program. And it can be a buzzkill, I think, for some of you, but there are very different reasons why this game at this time matters so much to the two programs and the two head coaches. I will start, though, by doing this, because I get sappy a lot, as you know, on the show and podcasts. There's a lot of crying and feelings and things like that, so I'll get a little sappy for just a second. So the Texas-Oklahoma game always means something different to me. I'm lucky enough to have unique perspective. I've been on the field for the Texas-Oklahoma game at least four times as a player, and many, many other times as a kid on the field. I've been down there a bunch. I grew up going to the game and being on the field. I was on the field starting at the age of 9 because my dad used to officiate the game, quite a few of the Texas-Oklahoma games. So I grew up, and you hear people talk about this all the time. I grew up walking down that tunnel to come onto the field. I grew up, I can tell you a funny story, but I grew up watching my dad knock on the locker room doors. I mean, you can't appreciate, particularly now in this era of the sort of Taj Mahal-like locker rooms for big-time college programs, how outdated, cramped, tiny, leaking the locker rooms are at the Cotton Bowl. So it's funny to think about now, but I grew up standing there, watching my dad knock on the door, telling each team it's time to come out, because they would do that. The officials knock on the door and they say it's time, and then the players come out, that kind of thing. So it's just it's a really important moment. So the most important moment of my football career, which wasn't all that great, but it was okay. But it was, and this is sappy, but I'll put it in perspective. Since I grew up as a kid going to that game and walking behind my dad and the players when they would go out on the field, because I'd get a field pass, and I knew as a kid of official, you had to keep your mouth shut and just enjoy the game. And so I took it in. But I remember him always telling me that, this is at the time when I was growing up, that this is the biggest game in college football with the best players in college football. And he would say, you're going to see a lot of these guys in the NFL soon. And so I just sort of grew up thinking that's how much that game meant, and it did. And then to think that years later, the most important moment of my football career, good and, there are good moments and bad moments, of course, but was the day that I was a team captain and they knock on the door. And to think that as an 8 and 9-year-old, I walked down that tunnel, to think that I was walking down that tunnel as a player representing my school was the most important moment of my athletic career. I took every step, took longer. I took it all in. I made sure I walked over and chatted up Barry Switzer, who I'd known and watched as a kid, and all of a sudden I'm across the field from him. I just soaked it up because it was this crazy moment that all of a sudden the kid that had never even thought about playing in that game is walking down that tunnel representing a school. So it was the most important moment for me. It was just the game always meant more to me. It's just the biggest deal. I mean, I just couldn't believe when I was a kid walking down that tunnel how big the stadium was, how loud it was, never realizing how cramped the locker rooms were. So it's... maybe I think about it more and I talk about it more just because of my background and my perspective on it. But here we are now, and how different these programs are, and why this game is so... I'm not saying this for face painters. I'm not saying this because this is just what fans want to do and get worked up. I'm talking about if you look at this game and these two programs critically, it is a very, very important time. A difference-making time for the programs and the coaches. I'll tell you why. The Texas-Oklahoma game used to be, for people that just don't fully get into it, you're not old enough to fully appreciate it, which is fine because it's been a while since it's mattered. But the Texas-Oklahoma game used to be, to the college landscape and to the NFL draft, what Georgia and Alabama has been the last several years. Think of it in those terms. Right, when Georgia and Alabama over the past several years have lined up, it's the best players in the game. It's the most meaningful game. They just have separated themselves from the pack. But for a long, long time, that's what Texas-Oklahoma was. It had that kind of star power, that kind of impact on the whole landscape. The best players in the game, the best NFL prospects in the game were on the field at one time, and it mattered in the rankings as well. Obviously, things are different, right? Everyone knows that. They've been different for more than a decade. You know, they've each had their moments. They're all over the map. Texas, in particular, has been an underachieving paper tiger. Oklahoma's had NFL prospects. Texas, not so much. So the game is lost on the national scale. It's lost a lot of the appeal. But present day, the game that comes up on Saturday, it's an interesting setup for both. It's meaningful for both in different ways. And as weird as this will sound, I think this game means different things to both. I don't think Oklahoma has to win for them to get out of it as a program and their head coach what they need. Texas, on the other hand, has to win. You ever want to leave the paper tiger thing behind? You've got to win, because you got to get to a Final Four. So what I think the game means to Oklahoma, now, one, it's not a must-win. Now, that's a buzzkill for a fan, so I guess just move on and don't listen. But it's not a must-win. I don't think so at all. For it to mean something, for it to give them some momentum, I don't think it's must-win. It's a bonus to win for Oklahoma, a huge bonus to win. But remember to put this in perspective, remember where Oklahoma came from in the past year. They were run off the field by anybody they played any good. Even at home in Norman, they're run off the field by Kansas State. Anybody slightly competitive, and they were non-existent a year ago in Brent Venables' first year. They were run off the field by Texas in the most embarrassing way. It was ridiculous. It was disappointing. It was over at halftime. So TCU blows them out. Kansas State blows them out. Texas runs them off the field. But for Brent Venables in Oklahoma, a good showing and being competitive and playing well is the metric. And that's good enough for right now compared to where they came from. For him and what people think of him and the relevance of him, being competitive and putting on a good show on Saturday does the trick. I mean, fans aren't going to want to hear that. I know. And he's not going to say, oh, we just hope we play well. I'm just telling you from a critical perspective what the Oklahoma program needs, what he needs, because I've been a guy that has been saying for the first time I saw their defense get shredded, I said, this guy needs to be in a short leash. You cannot go into the SEC if you're Oklahoma, you can't play a lick of defense. If you get blown out in the Big 12, what would happen to you in the SEC? So I've taken a very negative position on whether or not that guy should stick around for 3 years. I'm still not convinced. But for him, in proving that he belongs and proving that he shouldn't be on a short leash, he's got to play well on Saturday. I don't know exactly what that is. I guess we'll know it when we see it. But you can't get blown out again. Or a lot of us, certainly me, are going to say that leash needs to be really short, man. You cannot answer the bell when you play against top-flight competition. He needs to stop that narrative. The Oklahoma program going into the SEC needs to be able to stop that narrative. I don't care about 3 years ago or 5 years ago. Right now, going off of what happened last year, they've got to change the narrative, and they can change the narrative by playing well, being in the game, making it look good, all that stuff. Then, in a completely different way of looking at it, I think, you can disagree. For Texas and Steve Sarkisian, this is the best chance to launch the program into relevancy. And I am not going to say that we're back stuff. Okay? Stop there. A win on Saturday, and Texas is in the Final Four, absent a complete meltdown along the way, which I guess could happen, but it shouldn't. Okay, understand this. It's not just beating Oklahoma on Saturday that makes this so relevant. It's not just that you're beating your rival and that's cool and nice and everything. It will launch them into the Final Four. The Final Four is the piece that changes the narrative for Steve Sarkisian and Texas. To get to the Final Four, there's not a lot of work to be done because the Big 12 is awful this year. Beating Oklahoma is about the only thing in your way. He's got to get to the Final Four to change the narrative. Brent Venables in Oklahoma needs to play well to change the narrative. Sarkisian has to get to the Final Four. That would change the narrative. The narrative right now, and it's deserved, is you're a paper tiger. For Sarkisian, for the Texas program, it's you're a paper tiger. You're a bunch of money. You talk a big game. You've got history. You're a blue blood that just doesn't deliver when it matters. You haven't taken that next step. It's a fair criticism. For Texas, you've got to get to the Final Four. Or otherwise, the same storyline is going to continue. You're a paper tiger. You're just a bunch of money and a blue blood. For Steve Sarkisian, he's got to change the narrative, and the narrative is a guy who keeps getting big breaks. Remember, he has been the head coach at some top-flight programs, and it's not gone well for a number of reasons. But for Sarkisian, whose time at Texas has been underachieving, the numbers just aren't good enough. He's underachieved. So for him to change the narrative, he's got to get to a Final Four. This is the only thing between Texas and a Final Four is Oklahoma. If he wants to change the narrative, and he does, then this is it. For every discussion about Sarkisian, they go the same way, right? Every one of them. Up until Saturday, it'll be the same thing. Yeah, but. Yeah, right, they're back. Yeah, right. Sure, this year's different. Yeah, sure, right. We hear this all the time. Oh, he's an offensive genius. Yeah, I hear that all the time. I mean, all those qualifications, right? I mean, it's all fair. It's deserved. He's underachieved. You've got to get to a Final Four to change the narrative. Otherwise, all that yes, but, yeah, I've heard that before, maybe, sure, right, all that stuff, it belongs. A loss against Oklahoma for him and the Texas program would be a killer blow. You're a touchdown favorite. You've got everything you want. You have everything set up to get to a Final Four. You've got an easy schedule to get there. If you were to lose to your rival, it would start that narrative all over again. Will he get fired this year? Would he get fired this year? No. I don't think so. I would almost say no way, but I guess I won't say no way. No, I don't think so. A loss to Oklahoma and a missed chance to make the Final Four while going into the SEC, and the narrative is going to stick with him, and the narrative is going to stick with Texas for some time. It will be called the same overhyped Texas, paper tiger Texas, and then it would be the same argument underachieving Sarkisian. He needs it. He needs to get to a Final Four. He should get to a Final Four. Now, the thing that he has, and I know most people would say, yeah, sure, Ward, we've heard all this stuff before. Yeah, I know you have. And it's usually a lie, and it's usually incorrect. But I would say there's a but here. Sarkisian has a team that's built differently. Okay? It's built differently than any Texas team in the past decade, I would submit. Maybe even longer than that. For an offensive guy, he's got a team that's built in a different way. For a guy that gets, likes to talk about and likes people to brag about skill position players, quarterbacks, and all that stuff, this team is built a different way. His front seven defense is different. It's different than it's been in a decade, maybe longer than that at Texas. Texas has had skill players for a long time. That's not hard to do. They're not hard to get to Texas. But they couldn't even win the league with a guy who's likely going to be the NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year. They couldn't win the league with Bijan Robinson. They couldn't be relevant with Bijan Robinson. This Texas team is different, though. It's built differently. Here's what I mean, and it's backed up by data. Texas has one of the better pass rushes, one of the better front sevens in all of college football right now. They can wreck an offense. I know that sounds simple, but that's pretty much the concept, right? You've got college teams that drop back to pass a lot. Can you wreck it? Can you disrupt it? When you can do that, the game gets much easier. Texas can wreck an offense. And I say that for the first time in over a decade. You could look at a Texas team and watch them wreck an offense. Here are the numbers to back it up. Texas gets pressures on this is a remarkable number. Texas gets pressures on the quarterback almost 40% of the dropbacks. That's a big number. That's a giant number. In fact, I think it's one of the three best in all of college football. That's a big deal. That changes the entire game. Just that. That's why in the NFL, why the Micah Parsons of this world are worth so much money, because you do that, you wreck a passing offense with defensive front seven players, and the game changes. The game becomes much easier. So opposing quarterbacks have only completed just less than 53% of their passes. You do that, you win. You do that and you win just about every week. Now, can they keep it up? Well, they better. They better. So for Oklahoma, it's a setup. It's a nice setup. It's a chance. They're playing with house money almost. Oklahoma Brent Venables are playing with house money. A good showing, a really good showing is good enough. More than that is gravy. For Steve Sarkisian in Texas, it's absolutely must win. It's absolutely must win and go on a run. It's absolutely must win, and the trajectory has to be the Final Four, or it's a disappointment. Texas has to win on Saturday. He has to win on Saturday and then make a run to the Final Four, or be called a paper tiger again.
Jeff Ward, weekdays on 102.7 ESPN.